Thank you everyone for joining, and welcome to Verve's presentation about applying 62443 concepts to securing OT or ICS endpoints. With me today, I'm John Livingston, but with me today is Ryan Zahn. Ryan is the Director of Customer Success at Verve. Ryan has about 15 years in the control system security world, about 8 with Verve, and he'll be taking you through a brief demonstration of Verve's platform and how we address these endpoint risks. I'm John Livingston. I'm the CEO of Verve. I've been with the company for about 5 years. Just by way of background on who we are as a company, we've been in business for almost 30 years. We started our life as a control system engineering firm. So we have a long history and heritage of control system engineering across various industries. And then for the past 15 years or so, we've been deploying our Verve Security Center platform, which helps clients broadly manage their OT cybersecurity. And this is the platform that Ryan will demonstrate a little later. And then we provide a range of control system security services to our clients as well. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is based on that real world experience of applying these 62443 standards into the control system environment. So we hear a lot about 62443 and zones and conduits, and a lot of it focuses around networks and connections, et cetera. However, the application of 62443 is very applicable and important for endpoint security as well. Endpoints are, they can contribute, obviously, they significantly contribute to the automation and feasibility of managing systems. A lot of these are crucial to operations. And there are a significant number of insecurities on these endpoints. Most of them are not well managed in traditional OT environments. We don't have the same kind of IT security management or IT systems management on many of these devices, and therefore things like ransomware and other threats can take advantage of these. Unfortunately, due to the complexity and sensitivity of these OT endpoints, they're often ignored in the cybersecurity world. And so what we're going to talk about today is how to raise them up in terms of their focus from an OT security point of view, and how to apply those core principles of 62443 on those endpoints. So we know this is a group that knows probably quite a bit about 62443, but we felt it was important before diving into a demonstration of how you can do this on endpoints, just to remind ourselves of the various components or alphabet soup that is the standards. So we've got security levels, got zones and conduits, foundational requirements, security requirements, et cetera. And ultimately, it's about implementing and maintaining these controls. But as we get down into these endpoints, right, we just wanted to make sure, as we ground ourselves in what we're going to talk about here, that we make clear the foundation that we're building this on. So what is a security level? Well, we've got target security levels. Those are things that are our objective, right? That's what we're trying to achieve on any one of the individual controls. We've got a capability security level, meaning what are the set of controls that if I implemented them, I could achieve. And then finally, we actually have the actual achieved security level. So where am I against my target? And these are a value between 1 and 4 that are laid out in the guidelines. To achieve that security level, we have a set of foundational requirements that get applied. And what we've done here is we've talked about how these foundational requirements might apply specifically to endpoints. So at the top there, identification and authentication control. So how do we manage authorized users? How do we make sure that only certain users can use these accounts, that those accounts are managed, that access is managed to those accounts, et cetera. We've got use control. So the standard is around maintaining only the appropriate uses of devices, and that includes assigning privileges to perform whatever it is the requested action is. Then system integrity. So making sure that the system is protected from malware, from vulnerabilities, from insecure code, et cetera. Then on the data confidentiality side, making sure that that endpoint has controls on it to protect the confidentiality of the information and to prevent unauthorized disclosure of information and the applications that that information is sitting in. Then restricted data flow, so protecting endpoints from communications that shouldn't exist, ports that shouldn't be opened, et cetera. Then being able to respond to events. So monitoring those endpoints for logs, user behavior, performance metrics, and then being able to quickly respond to any events. And then finally, making sure we have resource availability, which could include things like backups, ensuring redundancy, ensuring securing availability through reducing risks and vulnerabilities, et cetera. And so these foundational requirements then essentially are how we think about potentially achieving that security level that we want to achieve. And for each of those requirements, they will have certain components, which are a certain number of security requirements. And so the security requirement, for instance, for foundational requirement number 6 would be having audit logs and having accessibility to audit logs. And so these together, these foundational requirements then allow us to achieve a level of a security level target. So we pick a security level target that we have for that endpoint. So that endpoint sits within a certain zone that's a critical zone. And so we say, look, we want to achieve a security level 2 or security level 3 on that device. And then we say, okay, given that, when we look at those functional requirements, those 7 items, what and the related security requirements that go along with it, how am I going to achieve that security level? What controls or requirements am I going to put in place to get there? So am I going to patch them? Am I going to, ensure malware, anti-malware is deployed, application whitelisting, ensure I've got application firewalls, et cetera. And then I'm going to refine that based on, sub requirements, security requirement enhancements, they're called. And then finally, once we put those in place, we can arrive at a security level, an actual security level. So where am I actually, and make sure that our actual levels are above what our targets are. And so as we think about applying this to endpoints, we think that this framework is set up essentially to ensure we can configure and harden and secure our endpoints in an effective way. And so essentially, as we work through this process, the first step is to define. It's to define all of the endpoints in the environment. So let's make sure we identify every endpoint, inventory, visibility, et cetera. Defining the zones that each of those are in, and then what are the target security levels that I have for that zone and those particular endpoints in the zone. Then we design the right set of security controls for that. So what are the SRs for each of the functional requirements that I want to achieve? And then talk through and design how I'm going to apply those security requirements to that particular endpoint. And then what we'll do is typically we'll put in the Verve platform, and we'll show you this, where we can then assess the current status of security against those security requirements and functional requirements. Am I patched? Do I have an appropriate control over users and accounts? Do I have application whitelisting? Is it in lockdown? Do I have up-to-date antivirus signatures, et cetera? And then we can prioritize which of those security requirements that can be applied immediately. For say, I can make sure that application whitelisting is in lockdown. And some of those that can't necessarily be applied immediately, like for instance, patching all of the systems, where I may need to apply compensating controls instead. So once I've assessed, then we move to implementation. And that's where the Verve platform is quite helpful in this. So we can go from assessing the environment and knowing exactly what our situation is from a security and compliance with the various standards of 62443. And then I can actually implement it. I can patch things. I can harden configurations. I can remove users and accounts that shouldn't be there. I can close ports or services that shouldn't be opened, et cetera. And then I can reassess. The minute I've done those things, it automatically reassesses where I am against my overall security level target. And have I achieved it or have I not? And then I can take further actions to make sure I achieve that target level. And then potentially the most important part of this whole journey is to be able to maintain those levels as we go forward. And so instead of having to do a once a year or once a quarter, whatever it is, assessment against 62443 standards, by having a platform in there focused on the endpoints, I can have real-time visibility in knowing whether I'm achieving the security level targets that I aspired to. I can then quickly respond in case for some reason I dipped below. For instance, new patches have been released, or for some reason changes have happened to a configuration and ports and services were open. I can quickly respond to those and get myself back in compliance with whatever security level target I aspired to. And then over time, I can review those targets and I can say, okay, we had a target of a 2 when we began, but we'd actually like to increase that target to a 3, let's say, because on certain of our zones, they are very, very critical to operations. And so by having the platform in place, we can over time increase our targets and therefore follow that along with increased security requirements to improve our overall security level actuals. And so what that looks like in a kind of a diagram point of view is that by having this control over the endpoints, I can both at the initial level of risk reduction, I can identify and eliminate accounts that shouldn't be there. I can remove risky software that shouldn't be in that environment. I can identify dual NICT devices which are creating insecurities moving around between two zones that shouldn't be connected. I can ensure that backups are up to date so that the functional requirement around response is met. And then similarly, I can monitor things from a threat response point of view. So monitoring anomalous file access or encryption, or alerting on unplanned changes to controllers or field devices. By focusing on that endpoint and really bringing 62443 to the endpoint, I can significantly improve my overall security levels across both risk reduction and threat response. So how do we do that? We do that through what we call the Verve Security Center, or what we call an OT security management platform. And it begins with that first piece, which is really getting a deep visibility into the inventory. And when we mean deep, not just to say, okay, yes, I know what's on the wire and what's communicating, but I know every user on that account. I know all the patch status, et cetera. And by gathering that really deep inventory, I can then understand what the vulnerabilities are. I can both identify missing patches so I can know my security level, but then because we're using the platform, we can actually take actions to patch things and we can improve that security level. We can harden configuration. So not only do we know that configuration, but again, because we've got the platform in the network, we can start to harden those configs. We can close ports. We can stop services that are running. We can ensure passwords are set at certain ways. We then can gather all the users and accounts and again, take actions to remove those users or limit their access. We can review anti-malware, whether that be whitelisting or AV, et cetera. One of the key functional requirements is to monitor logs and to be able to conduct a rapid response. Well, within the platform, we have all of the detection capabilities so that we can monitor for potential anomalous patterns of behavior at the endpoint, users and account behavior, file creation behavior, et cetera. And then finally, incident response built into that so that we can respond to an incident at the endpoint. We know we've got a backup in case a backup is needed. We can respond to a threat on that endpoint by patching it or removing a user, et cetera. And this platform has been proven for 15 years, specifically in the control system world, and has been adapted so that it works effectively to ensure compliance with the 62443 standard. And so what I'm going to do now that we've kind of laid out that landscape of how we think about applying 62443, onto these OT endpoints, I'm now going to turn it to Ryan, and he's going to take you through a bit of a demonstration of how this platform allows you to do that. So Ryan, I'll hand it over to you.
Are you guys going to pause it for 1 second before I start showing this? I'm just tweaking something real quick.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, it'll only take 1 more second. All right, guys, I'm going to take you through the console here real quick to talk about the IEC 62443 SLAs. So this will be, showing you the before and after from 2 different zones. So one that has had the SLA applied, and then the other one to where we have yet to apply any of those types of requirements. So just a few things to point out here. So this first section is the protected zones. So what you see here is actually outstanding patches by asset. So this is showing you the top 20 assets here in this case. Now, the one thing that's important to show is that there are no critical patches that are being displayed. So there's actually a metric over here that shows outstanding critical patches, which is actually 0. Now, the other one is outstanding patches. Now, the reason you see a value of 200 is because not all patches are security related. Some of them might be workarounds or configuration changes, but we want to make sure our users can see all the data. So that could be filtered out, but just showing you that the criticality of the patches is very low without any criticals actually showing up. Now, what should go right along with that is vulnerability data. So this other vertical bar chart here is showing you outstanding vulnerabilities per the top 20 assets, actually the exact same assets that you see in the bar up top. But again, same thing. There are some vulnerabilities because there are some like low and medium risk, but there are no critical vulnerabilities. So they're showing a 0. So we can show that we are patching and also mitigating vulnerabilities at the same time. Now, a couple other areas to think about, for users as well as different compensating controls. In this case, this is actually a data table of users with expired accounts, and there's actually a count of 0 for each one of these assets. And again, these do match up with all these other assets in the previous bars and visualizations. But typically, if there were past users with expired passwords, meaning they haven't been changed in at least the last 180 days, we would actually start seeing the list of users and how many of those actually exist throughout the environment. Now, along with your traditional IEC 62443 requirements, we also look at things like compensating controls. So for example, this is application whitelisting. And so this environment is actually deploying that alongside with some anti-malware software. But what we look at is every machine is in lockdown mode, meaning that every machine is actively whitelisted and that no applications or executables are able to run outside of that defined list. Now, subsequently, alongside of that is the backup status. So in this case, all of our backups are showing successful. And so we know we have good backups. So if there ever was an event where we need to restore a backup, we're able to do that without any fear that there might be a bad or failed backup in that case. Now, when you compare that data to the unprotected zones, the one that hasn't had the SLA or SLTs applied, is pretty much the exact opposite of what you'd think it would be. So for example, outstanding patches. So these are the top 20 assets that are missing patches, and that list of assets does follow through the rest of this visualization. But we can see the different severities associated with it, a little bit of everything. So there are lots of critical, important, high, medium, low, as well as the total counts of those. For example, 164 critical patches here are displayed, 1,500 total outstanding patches, again, not just critical, but as well as the other types of patch types that are in there. Now, again, that should correlate directly to vulnerability data. So you should see relatively the same type of breakout across the vulnerabilities. So we have 1,900 critical vulnerabilities in this case versus and a total of 2,000 vulnerabilities altogether. Now, as we scroll down again, looking at compensating controls as well as user accounts, we can see 4 of those 20 machines up there do have user accounts that have passwords that are older than 180 days. One of those, actually 2 of those being the administrator account, which is one that we should definitely make sure we're changing passwords on as often as possible. But there may be a service account, for example, this Acronis agent user, or maybe this dhost account as well, that may be some forgotten accounts that have been out there for a long period of time that people either just don't use or just haven't thought about changing that password. Now, just like above application whitelisting status, we can see there are different modes available. So we can see that there are none in lockdown mode, but we do have some that are in modes other than disabled, which is important. But there is a large subset of assets that are actually currently disabled, meaning that there is no activity from the whitelisting agent in that case. And same thing with backups. We have no successful backups in this group of 20 machines. Most of them either have warnings or failures. And so that would be something that we need to investigate and also try to apply the IEC 62443 requirements. All right, John. I don't know how much time I'm supposed to spend, but I could have gone farther. I just, that was what I've gotten built since yesterday. Bueller?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay,
Okay,
there we go.
we can go ahead and stop the recording. All right. Thank you, Ryan, for showing us how to make IEC 62443 applicable at the endpoint. So there's a few key takeaways we have for you today. Number one is OT security management can really make implementation of ISA 62443 on endpoints feasible. 62443 can be daunting, but with a platform approach like this, you can assess the current status and apply those security requirements on endpoints efficiently. Number two, effective risk reduction really does require endpoint management and securing endpoints with security actions. It's not just tagging an asset and tracking its existence. We have to harden these devices by taking actions, and a platform approach like this can help make that happen. And then finally, overall, a cybersecurity program built on 62443 foundations is really powerful in helping you improve your overall security posture. While assessing risk requires a lot of context and nuance, but a program that's standardized like this can really allow you to make progress quickly. So thank you very much for joining us here today. And obviously, if you have any questions, please post those and we're happy to answer them. Thanks so much.